Hi, everybody. We're going to wait a few minutes to get people on here.
Make sure you mention that the woman was braver than the guys.
Yeah.
Because she didn't cry on it.
Was there a lady BLM officer?
Yeah.
She was up front with the shield.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, you ready, David?
It's still connecting.
Okay.
Still connecting.
Oh.
All right, ready.
Okay,
3,
so
2.
the morning was really boring and everyone was falling asleep, but the afternoon was quite exciting. We went back in to cross-examine, and let me see if I can find his name. David Kelter, he's the Park Service guy. He's the set team. It did come out that he worked at the Mueller Refuge in 2004, so I felt that was kind of interesting. Okay, so in cross-examination with Tanasi and Stewart, they were talking about the briefing. I mean, everybody's been bringing up the briefing on the night of the 11th. And the fact that they were all told that the cattle impound was on hold, that they weren't going to continue with that, and that they were told they were going to be attacked by militia. He was actually told that he got there early and they were doing training, and he was told that the militia were plan on the militia coming or protests happening, and so they were training before April on crowd control and Ranger, I want to say it's Ranger recovery. Thank you. In his statement, and we get a lot of do not recalls, and Tomasi brought up his MOA, and in it he heard radio traffic about protesters. Here we go again. He makes him refuse to say protesters 3 times, and then talk about his MOA where he calls them protesters. Then he was asked about the canines, and everything was, I don't recall, not to my knowledge. So, this guy's got training. He's in the, what did they call him? Not SWAT, what is it? SAT team. But he's not informed on any canines the whole time. Engel goes up, and in his statement he said that they were called from the hotel because cowboys with guns were at the gate at post 1. But when he got there, there wasn't any cowboys with guns. Then they talked about the 2 guys with tactical vests that did the 1,000-yard stare, and asked if they aimed their weapons. Todd Engel mentioned the Constitution, and Cregan got irritated, and you could hear it in her voice. She was just downright evil almost. Objected and said no legal questions. Then Todd brings up the marksman team. That's what they're calling them. The marksman team is another word for sniper team. That was objected to, and then he moves on. He brings up the constitutional rights again, like protesting is covered under your First Amendment, and objection again, and now the judge gets irritated with him and tells him, Todd asks to the judge, can I say it's protected within your First Amendment? And the judge says, no, you cannot. Then he pulls up a bunch of photos to see if this gentleman's in any of them. He finally finds one that he is, and Todd admits his first piece of evidence. That was kind of exciting. And then he was asked, once he finds the picture with him in there, he's asked, can you show me your designated sniper team? But they make him change it to marksman team. And he says no. And Todd says, is that because they were already deployed? And he says, yes, it was objected to, but the guy said yes already, and so Todd moved on. Then there was some talk about the shields and battalions because of the training. He refuses to say he was trained in us. And then he was asked about spending the night in the foxhole, but the guy kind of went deer in headlights and kind of didn't answer anything. It was objected to. Then we had Jackson get up. And Jackson was really short this time, but he did come up and say, there's other reasons that people could be staring. He brought up that if you were a victim, that you could have that stare. He also brought up if, say, this person was late to court, that Jackson may stare at him, but that does not mean he was going to go home and shoot him. on the way home. And so, I think that was objected to as well. And then he asked if anyone was arrested, and he moved on. The government then had another redirect, and they asked where the marksman team was deployed. It was between post 1 and post 2 along the edge of the wash. And what kind of optics, rangefinder, binoculars, and scope, and he says, I don't know. Oh, that was Jess. Jess comes back in. What kind of optics are they using? Rangefinder, binocs, and scope. But he's not, this guy is in charge of this team, but he doesn't know what he has with him. Then we go on to the next person, Officer Brandon Nobody. I'm not really good with that name. Novotny?
Yeah, Novotny.
He is the third person in the stacked picture with the CES gun. The set team, they were brought there because they have special guns they can use their special guns in parks. They were wearing a standard uniform, which includes a ballistics vest, a ballistics helmet, and their green clothing. Anybody know why the park rangers would need sniper teams? I think this is pretty interesting. And it looks like they were also armed in 2012, which I think that's another interesting fact that's coming out of all of this. As he goes through his direct, he says that they were instructed to use less than lethal force, but we did not because we feared if we did that we would be shot. We would not make it out of the wash. They made, and this is the stacked team in the photo. He said they made repeated requests to pull back, and they were denied. Then he mentions one of the threats that the stacked unit was looking at. There was a team moving as a unit using hand motions and pointing their weapons in high ready and then low ready and moving. We're gonna wait a second for this to go by. Okay, so they were, as they were moving, they were pulling their weapons up to high ready and then back to low ready and moving. High ready, low ready, and moving. He says, then he knelt down, said a prayer, thought about his family, made his peace with God because he did not think he would get out of the wash. And he gets teary at this moment. Like, here we've got another guy in here and he's getting teary. After the Dan Love meeting is when they were told to move back. And they moved back at the last because if the crowd had come forward, they would be able to use less than lethal force. Yeah, I'm completely finished with my book now, so have to get a new one of those. He also said that as they were leaving, a truck got stuck in the sand. And that he was about to ram that truck to get it unstuck from the sand because he felt if the officer had gotten out that he would be shot and that it was better to have damage to the truck than a dead officer in the sand. But the officer in the truck actually did get out and put his four-wheel in and get the truck out fine, and the guy didn't ram the truck. So, and then he talked about as they were leaving. He talked about, they were forced to put these trailers on their trucks, and he was behind this truck that had a trailer and it couldn't excel very fast, and the protesters on the side, they were throwing rocks at his truck and they were yelling things, and he believed that they were going to be surrounded and attacked basically on their way out. And I mean, he really made it, it was another very emotional performance by them. Then we have Tomasi come up on the cross-examination. And he's talking about the briefing on the 11th. This guy says, yeah, this is still the guy. He says that the FBI was there and said a large number of people who were on the terrorist watch list were coming to the event. Pretty huge, right? Everyone else that's talked about the briefing on the 11th has kept it short to nothing. They don't want to talk about it, but this guy says, well, yeah, the FBI came in and said, you've got a bunch of people on the terrorist watch list coming to this event and scaring the daylights out of them.
Camping.
Yeah, camping. And so that was interesting. Then they tried over and over to talk about the Dave Bundy arrest or the Margaret Houston event. every single time it was objected to, they said it's not relevant. So they moved on. I know that Tomasi argued that it is relevant to the threat that they felt. Just like how all this other stuff is relevant to their threat, but the stuff we wanted in there is not. Then on the 11th, it was found out that there was another meeting on the 11th, or on the morning of the 12th, and the night of the 11th, there was at the meeting, they were told that they were not going to, the operations were ceased, and that they were to just stay to get the cattle out and the government's property. Now, the morning of the 12th, supposedly the threat level was lowered. It wasn't as high, but they were still told to stay there even after being up for so many hours to protect the cattle before the cattle left and the government assets. Then they were talking about the shield in the stacked formation. Her shield in the stacked formation was a ballistic shield, but that they did have other riot shields there. They also talked about the fact that most of the officers had riot gear in their vehicles, batons and things. They were prepared for that. Then they were talking about, after Love goes to the gate, he was asked to take his vests off, put your guns away, and take your helmets off. And he refused to do that. And then he was talking about how Nevada Highway Patrol did not assist with making any arrests that day. And that he had met with the U.S. Attorney in 1 visit, 3 phone calls. Then we go into Engel. Engel did a wonderful job today. He was really doing amazing. He started out with the statement that the protesters had better angle of fire and the high ground. Now he's talking about these group of individuals that are moving tactically, and they're the same group that's raising their firearms up and then low. It's like high ready, low ready, then move. And they're saying they're doing this as a unit, and it's making them really uncomfortable. They had moved from the wash up the concrete barriers to under the bridge, and they were taking cover there in between the pillars. He brings up a bunch of video where they're in a stacked formation and none of the protesters have crossed that line further in the middle of the gate, and that there's nobody up in those spots that they claim at that time. Then he was asked if he recognized Todd, but the guy said he does not recall faces. Then we have Jackson go back up, and he said, because we're hearing a lot of this fear. Everyone's in fear. They all have a fear. They have a threat level, and they have a fear level, and everything's being rated. And Jackson brings up, as a law enforcement officer, you work with fear in your line of duty every day. You get training on how to deal with fear and confronting individuals. You get training on how to manage your fears. He said, you said this event was a 10 in fear, but at no point were you paralyzed with fear that you could not do your job. So, that was good. Then I believe we go into another officer, and this officer is Tara McBride. She is the one in the stack formation that has the shield in the very front. She pretty much has almost the exact same testimony as the previous guy, except for she says on the Southbound Bridge they were throwing rocks and spitting on them, and that under the bridge there were 2 teams of 3. Now, I recall that it could be my mistake that they were talking about 2 teams of 2 before, and now there's a 3rd person entered into each of those teams. Not sure there. And she did say that those people were pointing their weapons. She also said they requested to fall back at 3 different times, but were denied. Then her team, those, 4 individuals, talked amongst themselves and decided to move themselves back and not request it again. Then the government in direct examination asked, they showed a picture and they said, can you barely see yourself in this picture? And I thought, that's an interesting question. That's not leading at all, right? So that was just something. Then she talks about Black Hat again. Black Hat gets brought up. But she did say that she did not see him point a weapon. They talked about when Love went down to the gate and that they were in fear of his life, so they made a rescue plan to go get him if he was taken. Then after that, they were told to go back to the pickup and leave. She felt in fear because local law enforcement did not support them. Like, they were asking for NHP to arrest the people on the bridge and stop the traffic, and they weren't doing it, and so everyone was frustrated, and that added to their fear level. Jess brought up her MOA and that nowhere in the report did you put the man with the plaid shirt with the black hat and the white patch in there. Engel gets up and impeaches her with the exact same video as the man before, because they're pretty much the same, so he shows the same video. On government redirect, they bring that video back up and they show at one point of the video, but it doesn't really matter because the team's already stacked. They want to say that the team's stacked because the people come down. Team's already stacked, but they say, on the southbound bridge, there's a few people that have stepped over the barrier and are in that area where they could possibly go down, and they're claiming that those people are the people that then go down there. It didn't convince me, but it may have convinced some of the jury. I think, yeah, they were definitely on the opposite side of the bridge, so they couldn't have been able to see them, but they're reaching with all of that. At the end of the day, we did end up calling in some jurors and letting go of juror number 12. We don't know who will take her place. Apparently she had been falling asleep quite a few times during trial. So we start back Monday with a new witness and a new juror number 12.
Awesome. Thank you.